Welcome to One Moment Wiser. This is Christy Bridges, and I have my friend Michelle Elliott. She's a pastoral counselor with Healing Space Ministries in Tulsa. And Michelle and I met actually because her husband is also a counselor who teaches a really great tools class to give people mental health tools, ways that we can manage ourselves. I got to talking to Michelle, and she helps her clients by introducing them to key aspects of their personalities that can help them appreciate themselves more and also can show them where they might get off track and make themselves miserable. I personally have found this kind of figuring out who I am and how other people who have some of these same traits have lived happier and more wisely. I have found that to be super helpful. And so I asked Michelle to come on today and share that with you. Michelle, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here.
Man, you have an amazing story. I was looking at your website, and like me, you and your husband went through some rocky times too, and you came together and got even stronger. And I just love that. It was kind of a romantic. So that really captured my heart. So tell me a little bit about you.
So, where do I start?
Hmm.
I would have been a person who said my family was close growing up. It was my normal. I didn't realize anything different until we had a major storm, I suppose. We divorced. We had been married 6 years and we divorced. We were apart for a year on year 7, which is funny because we split on our anniversary, 6th anniversary, and we got back together on our 7th. I think
Oh, no, that's kind of cool though.
I think there's something spiritual about that, the number 6 and the number 7,
Yeah.
in God's economy. And so we, through a strange set of circumstances, I met a girl at work who invited me to church, and I did the brave, bold thing and stood her up. But she
It takes
didn't.
a few invites, huh?
Yeah, she didn't let go of me though. She caught me the next day, and I eventually went, and
Oh, awesome.
that changed my life. Uh, from there on, I ended up inviting Anthony to church, and we talked to the pastor. And long story short, we got back together.
Aw.
As my husband says, God pushed a reset, but he didn't fix it.
Mm.
And so we kind of rocked along, raising kids. I homeschooled. He worked until about our 20th anniversary, and I just hit a wall. Like all of my traumas, all of my unprocessed grief, everything just converged, and it was the perfect storm. That landed us in counseling. And it was there that I started realizing, oh, those things that happened to me when I was little, that really wasn't okay. That was not very nice of this for this to happen. And so we started doing our own work. And I think that's partly, no, that's hugely why we are together today. We didn't set out to heal the marriage, we set out to heal us individually. And
Yeah.
then the marriage became healthier.
Oh, yeah. Because whole people are attractive. Whole people make us feel safe and secure. And you need that. Two people in a marriage don't um, complete the whole. They come together because of the wholeness, and that doesn't always play out in real life, right? People are always seeking their missing piece,
Right.
but you can see how that works out. It kind of blows my mind that it took you 14 years. The first time my husband and I split up, we were split up for 6 months. We got back together way too fast and still had a lot of the same problems. And a couple of years later was all it took before I was just dead. I had nothing left. And thankfully, God did, a miracle right about the day before we were supposed to get divorced. God just flipped my heart and talked me into trusting him, and he has done wonderful work since then. But kids can distract us from our problems, right? And so 14 years of raising kids meant that you lasted longer, but it didn't necessarily mean things were better on the inside.
Sure.
Wow. So I'm so glad that you did what you needed to do to discover where problems were. Did you I just have to ask because I kind of know the answer, but I think we all need to hear it. Did you recognize that the things happened to you as a child were what were driving you as a wife in your frustration and your responses?
No, not at all. Not at
Right?
I remember when we did our onboarding for
Mhm.
counseling, our homework was to go to codependency class. Now this is where it gets a little humorous. I said, "Okay, I'll go, but I'm not codependent. He is." Is that not the codependent statement of the year?
It kind of takes two, right?
But
I
yeah,
tell you what, codependency class was a life changer for
yeah,
me.
I was completely oblivious to any part that I might have had in this situation.
Right? We're just like, if he would just get right, and we don't notice because we develop instinctual reactions, or not really instinct, but I guess programmed reactions when we're young and we experience things, or when we're in relationships and we experience things, and then years later, that stuff feels normal to us. Not what happened necessarily, but just the reactions. They become such a part of us that that's just the right because we wouldn't act that way if it wasn't right, right? And then it takes an outsider, a professional, to help us unravel and find out that really it's those little traumas, those feelings of rejection and fear and abandonment and helplessness and all those things that keep flipping our switches in our current relationships, even though they're completely different relationships. Oh, I love that. So we also recognize, and you kind of came to this, and you'll have to tell us how you did it, but we also recognize that there are some things that the same thing can happen to 15 different people, right? And they're going to have 15 different responses. Some of them may be similar, but it's going to affect them differently because we each have these nuances in how we're made up, how we're prepared to receive. If I have a fluorescent light and I have an incandescent light and I have a neon light, they are all made to receive electricity and put out light, but they do it differently because of their build. And so you've been studying personality profiling program that doesn't necessarily pigeonhole people, but helps them see how, of course, they're reacting differently than the person they're married to or their parent or whatever because they're just built differently. How did you get into that?
So we were in a small group in our church, and the leader introduced us to a book called The Road Back to You. And I took the test. At that time, it was Ian Cron. At that time, that test was free. And I think I turned up as a 5, as did most of the people in our small group. And so
Mm-hmm.
I kind of just said, I don't know, this doesn't relate to me. I don't really care much about it. And then some years went by, and God, He circles back. The place where I was working, I was teaching on Monday mornings, and someone suggested The Road Back to You. So I thought, I'll give it another try. And
Yeah.
we started going through that book, and I was like, oh, okay, wow, yeah. And so we are all very different. Uh,
Right.
Speaking of Enneagram, The Road Back to You is Ian Cron calls it a primer. It's a very basic introduction into it. Um, so yeah, we started doing that, but I still couldn't find my type
Mm-hmm.
because the very basic introduction, I couldn't relate. And so I kept thinking, boy, I thought I was a 5, then I thought I was a 2, I thought I was a counterphobic 6.
Wow.
And then I was introduced to Tom LaHue YouTube videos. And I looked at his Am I a whatever number? And he
Mhm.
first person, I was like, oh, that makes a little bit of sense. And then I was listening to an Ian Cron podcast with Joe Saxton. She's a type
I
8.
like Joe.
And she said this one sentence that I was like, that's it. I remember the day I said exactly what she said. She was talking about sitting on the porch or something, and she had this thought, I have to take care of myself because nobody knows what they're doing. And I was like,
Oh.
I remember I said that. So then I started diving into what's my type. And then
Mm-hmm.
I kind of had this hunger to understand not just mine, but I wanted to understand everybody else's too, because we're in relationship with people. It doesn't matter where we are.
Yeah.
So that's what got me started with Enneagram.
Okay, so you said two key things I want to circle back to. Number one, that sentence is so funny because it goes back to my light bulb example. One person will say, I have to take care of myself because nobody knows what they're doing. Very 8. Somebody else may say, I have to take care of myself because everybody else is going to leave. Or I have to take care of myself because nobody else cares. And all of these similar sentiments that are going to lead in different directions.
Mm-hmm.
And they all stem from an underlying idea that's a little bit different depending on the kind of person you are. Now, you mentioned another thing that I want to circle back to, and that's this controversial word, Enneagram.
Enneagram.
Okay, we have this fear in Christian circles of doing anything that anybody else is doing.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't find a verse in the Bible, which was, by the way, written thousands of years before modern psychology, then we're scared of it. And if it ends in the word gram, then we think, oh, it must be related to the pentagram. Okay, gram is just a word that means you're drawing something. Ennea is 9. And so 9 gram, you're drawing a 9 pointed diagram. And in the Enneagram, there are 9 different psychologically developed personality profiles. Now, just like when you read The Road Back to You, I did the same thing, and I had struggles going, well, where do I exactly fit? Because we all share certain traits, especially, if we grow up in the same culture, we share a lot of similar traits. If we grow up female, if we, whatever our age is, will affect the traits that we share. And so it's definitely not a pigeonholing
No.
tool, and it's not a demonic tool. It is a tool that helps people understand that they're not alone. We are unique. God made us as his masterpiece. And we have beautiful qualities that we may underestimate or even look down on. And we have other people whose examples we can look at and say, okay, I want to avoid letting this get the better of me. And I want to use this to benefit people. And so that in a nutshell is kind of how I feel when I read The Road Back to You, and when I explored the personality types that came up on my chart. Because you have the type, and then you have the wings and all those things, and I was like, how cool. I'm an individualist. So knowing that, yes, it is perfectly normal to feel like an alien in every
Absolutely.
crowd. But at the same time, there's a lot of good to be found there. And the self-doubt is part of my makeup. And there are ways to get past that.
Sure.
Yeah.
I can tell you there's a couple of scriptures, how I had to get my head around it because I'm suspicious of everything to begin
Right.
with until I've proven it to myself. There are a couple of verses. I wrote those down this morning. One is John 1:3. through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that was made. And then Romans
Mm.
11:36, for from him and through him and for him are all things made. So how I came about it was, okay, the devil cannot create. All he can do is take and twist what God created. If God is the creator of all things and all things were created for him, then I have the same opportunity to take this and use it for his glory
Yes.
as the enemy has to use it for his. And so I think intention matters, is how am I using this? How am I stewarding this tool? I think that's an
Ooh,
important thing.
stewardship. It's so true because the body is not inherently evil, even though it can be used for ways that, cause self-destruction, right? Dancing used to be thought of as evil, but it's a
Okay.
great exercise. And before it was thought of as evil, it was used in worship. So, you know, different things throughout the years have gone in and out of trend in our religious circles. But we have to look at, how am I using this? Am I using it to glorify God? Because if wisdom exists, it came from God. And just because the rest of the world has recognized it, I mean, the rest of the world has recognized that um, there's, many, many religions have recognized a certain creation uh, point, a certain flood point. Different things from Proverbs have been used, in so many religions. So we have to recognize wisdom comes from God. We can use it for, it in His presence with His guidance.
Sure.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing those verses. I really appreciate that. So tell me about some of these personality types. I want to hear. Now, I read in your profile and you just kind of confirmed it. Definitely an 8, which is really neat because a lot of my friends are 8s, and that has grown my 8, um, my 8 traits, my traits of an 8. I've actually adopted a lot of the traits because I really, um, my mentors have just come across as these strong, confident, you know, 8s. So tell us a little bit about what you've discovered about yourself.
So for one thing, it helped me take judgments off of stuff. My husband is a 9 and I'm an 8. And oh my goodness, that caused us so much trouble for a long time, because 8s, I'm understanding from podcasts that the 8s have the most energy on the
Mhm.
Enneagram and 9s have the least. Well, so my expectation was, well, why isn't he going and doing this with me and running at 5,000 an hour? And he's looking at me like, can you just sit down? I'm like, no, I can't.
Sitting down is a waste of time.
Yeah.
Yep, sounds like me.
And so then the light bulb went on for me. Is like, oh, okay, there is no judgment in this. It's not right or wrong for me or him. He's just a 9 doing what 9s do. I'm an 8 doing what 8s do. And can we give grace? Their
Yes,
understanding is powerful.
yes,
And we still don't like it sometimes, but at least we can say, okay, well, it's a sad. It doesn't belong in a mad or a bad category. I don't have to be mad at you, and I'm not bad for doing whatever it is. It's just, okay, this is how we are.
how funny. So I'm actually kind of a 3-4. The 3, the performer, achiever, and
Mm-hmm.
the 4, the individualist. I'm like 1 point different on those two. And my husband's a 9. And I
Okay.
was reading something last night that said areas of growth for a 3, you need to learn to be a little more like the 9. I was like, honey, you're actually good for me. Because for the first few years of our marriage, I totally didn't respect him because he wasn't like everything that I thought I should be, And I realized when I had a close friend who was a lot like me, I thought, oh Lord, I could never live with this person. I would never be able to feel at rest and accepted. And I don't, I had a hard time accepting myself. And my husband, who is a 9, which is the peacemaker, the person who just wants everything to be calm, right? And when I'm around him, I can sit, and it's okay because it's quality time, so it's serving a purpose, right?
Sure.
It's like, okay, we're checking a box, it's all right. And he's so good for me that way, and he's taught me actually a whole lot about accepting others where that hasn't been natural for me.
Mm-hmm. I I had a scenario. It's been some years now. I have a friend, a good friend, who's a nine. We
Mm-hmm.
were in a we called it our internal soul care, as we met together as a staff, and talked through what's going on with our families, and that was our processing time. And for whatever reason, I was kind of turning on the inside. I didn't know why. I was just like, I just feel weird. She walked in, and peace walked in with her. That's the only way I know how to describe it. Is she brought peace into the room, and I was like, that is unbelievable, and she didn't even know it.
That's awesome.
So I started paying attention to those nines, and they do. They bring peace into the room.
And
And
it's a gift.
my husband and I joke about it now. I'm like, get away from me! You're making me tired.
Okay, that's funny. Uh, so when you work with people, what changes do you see as they begin to understand their particular niche, their particular Enneagram number, and maybe their wings or their tendencies?
The biggest thing would be those judgments that I talk about, because they come in thinking, well, how come you're not like me? We're human, right? And so that's what
Yeah.
we think of. Well, you think just like me. No, we don't. And so,
No.
especially when I have a couple and we start talking through this, the light bulb, as you said, it comes on, and just a look on their faces like, we had no idea. So
Yeah,
that's where I start, is just understanding. And can we just let that be okay?
right. And then we learn how to say the words the other person needs to hear to make them feel appreciated, to motivate them, turn them on, to ignite their interest, or to completely put them, right out of whatever we're trying to get across. I've recognized that I can be pretty intense, and I like people who are like, get up and go. And that overwhelms my husband because that
Yeah.
is so opposite of. And so I have to go about things not in a manipulative manner, but just in a manner that is less stressful for him,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't flood him with the need to close down. And I can understand that because there are things that overwhelm me. I have a friend who is a two, which is a helper. And
Yes.
they are that is their favorite thing, to help people, and it's just natural. Now, I have had some real codependent years, and so I tend to put a little bit of distance between myself and someone who's going to need too much help, because I like to help when I'm inspired, and when I want to. I want to give. I love to give,
Mm-hmm.
but I want to do it because I want to, and not because someone just constantly
Yeah.
needs, right? And so I'm being careful about that makes me get overwhelmed sometimes when I'm surrounded, even at home with all the animals we have. I have to get out because around me, everybody wants petting or treats, or just to follow me at a 2-inch space, or stand in front of me with every step I take. And I'm just like, because I feel the need, and it just overwhelms me. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm working on that. God is very generous to give me so much practice. But I've just recognized, as I understand me better, I can give other people a little bit more grace in their areas, as I get to recognize what those areas are.
Sure.
Yeah. So with marriages, you see that. What about with parents?
My parents, I don't know what type they were. My mom and my stepdad were both retired military people.
Yeah.
And so, if I could guess, I think my mom was probably a two, just because of the way that she liked to help. And
Yeah.
stepdad, I'm not quite sure, but so with parents, maybe older generations might not be as on board, but we don't type people. That's not our job because we don't know what's going on inside. All we can see is the outward fruit. But we can start to speak language. So, like, if I think my mom is two, I can start to speak that language and see if she responds. I don't have to label her. I don't have to say, well, you're this or that. It's just, it gives me language. If it doesn't resonate, okay, well, I might move to another one. Well, maybe this will work until
Yeah.
we find a place where we can understand and I can relate with her better.
Yeah. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to change who you are. A
No,
lot of people, when it comes to communication, they say, oh, why should I change who I am just to please somebody else? And that's not actually what you're suggesting here. It's if I want a point to get across, or if I want to connect with someone I care about, then I need to consider that person as
sure.
part of the conversation. And if that person's ears are tuned to a certain way, maybe a little less intensity, or maybe uh, higher respect. Some people, like that heightened authority kind of respect. Or maybe just certain words that really resonate and make their spirits full, right? Then I can learn how to speak that language. I mean, just like babies learn to speak our language, the parents' language, we can learn to speak our children's language
Right.
and our the language of our mates.
It goes both ways. So, we are trying to understand them. It's an invitation into a relationship. We also get to represent, this is how I hear things better. If I approach it this way, it goes better. And so it's a both. You're asking the other person to engage too. It's like, okay, how can we do this together?
So have you worked with people who literally just really don't know? You ask them for an opinion and they don't have one. You ask them for preferences and they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And where does that come from?
It's complicated. It can stem from a childhood where one person's feelings mattered and the other one didn't. So the parents mattered and the child didn't. So the child learns, I don't get to have a voice. I don't
Yeah.
get to have wants of my own. I'm here to serve them. And then we grow up and we don't know what we like or what we need or how to represent that.
Yeah. And some people end up, a little passive aggressive or a little deceptive or simply kind of like wallpaper, right? Where you really never feel like you're actually connecting or engaging. And it's because, like you said, it can be because they just don't feel like it matters if they say anything, or they've stopped even thinking of themselves because someone else always had the ideas, always had the feelings, always had um, the say. So I've learned um, in a couple of my relationships that I have a couple people in my life who are more reticent, or and actually just really don't have an opinion a lot of times, even though they could, and even though and even in situations where might not have an opinion because it's just a silly thing like where do we eat, and they're like somewhere with food, right? There's something about nurturing the sense that your opinion matters.
Mm-hmm.
And if I move too fast, it's okay to slow me down and I will stop and listen.
Sure.
Um, because little decisions are the beginning of personal growth, right? The beginning of relationship growth. And we can help bring people out if we recognize that that's a thing and don't just get frustrated with them
Right.
or just assume that they just want whatever we want. Ooh, assuming that they want whatever we want. Do you think that's dangerous?
Yeah, very.
Of course you want what I want because I'm always right.
I remember my, as I said, he's a nine, and we've both done a lot of work. When we got married, I cared a lot about things and I had opinions, and he didn't, and that worked good for me. A few years ago, he had an opinion about something, and I was like, wait a second, I didn't sign up for that. He has an opinion? What?
Now you've messed everything up.
Well, and then,
Yeah.
yeah, that was an invitation for me, though, to grow and say, okay, what can I find about this that I love, that I like?
Yeah.
He has an opinion. Okay, I can adjust to this. This is actually healthy. And
Awesome.
I can take a back seat sometimes. You know, I don't have to be out in front all the time. And so it's a there is an opinion. A lot of times it's just not shared because of whatever reason. It doesn't matter, or you're just gonna put me down, or whatever the reason is.
I remember when I was 10 thinking, choose your battles. And I started working on not being so opinionated, not being, not trying to fight back all the time. Um, and I have at times, gotten too far with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, choose your battles, but that doesn't mean that you're not a partner in the decision making. And sometimes, one person really does have strong opinions about like how the house should be decorated or where we should live or, whose house we go to for Christmas or all those things that you partner in, right? And the other person's opinion can kind of derail that a little bit. And you're like, but I really want this. And we have to kind of evaluate, well, what do we want more? Do we want the living room to be all neutral tones, or do we want this goofy clock in here because we actually respect this other person and want them to feel like this is their house too?
Sure.
Yeah. What can you think of like I guess maybe the biggest way that you have seen this help? Is there a story that you have where you've really seen people learn to appreciate themselves more, or you've seen them shift in their relationship because of recognizing who they were?
Um, I do. I have to be careful that I don't give any kind of identifying details
Very true.
for situations. So I'll speak generally.
Hmm.
When Because when we first learn about our personality, it's all about us. Oh, look, this is all about me.
Right.
When I start though to understand, okay, but what about you? I think
Mhm.
that's when the growth happens, and that's when the change happens. Is I see you now. I don't just see me and my lens and all the things I want. I actually can see you and how can I help you be a better person? And that's
Beautiful.
not a codependent stance. It's more of an invitation stance.
Yeah, that's a nurturing thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we are, my mom tells me we are our brother's keeper, we don't the Bible tells that each of us should carry our own load, but we should bear one another's burdens. So there is a partnership. It also says, continuously seek ways that you can encourage one another, with songs, with uh, I don't remember the entire verse at the moment. I'm going blank, but it's like continuously seek the way that we can support one another, and that ultimately changes the world.
Right.
Because if you can discover yourself and be healthier, and you can help others be more comfortable with who they are and grow, just by being supportive sometimes or learning to speak their language, then you're changing all the relationships they have and all the relationships you have. And that has this gorgeous, gorgeous ripple effect.
Mm-hmm.
Michelle, if someone needs counseling, how do they get a hold of you?
You can go to my website. It's
Mhm.
healingspaceministries.org, or
Repeat that.
my healingspaceministries.org, or you
Okay.
can find me on Facebook at Healing Space Ministries, or Instagram. Uh, Same, it's healing underscore space underscore ministries on Instagram.
Okay. So I will post a link in our comments below. But if you enjoyed this interview or you want to know more, please reach out to Michelle. And of course, follow One Moment Wiser on your favorite podcasting source. and on Facebook. I'll see you later. Thank you.